Anyway,
you don't want guys like the Utah governor and the what's it doing TV commercials together where well we
yeah.
don't get along but we
Yeah.
really respect each other and
You think he got libs
uh
of TikTok on that one? I think he actually made libs of TikTok. Well, Skinner made libs of TikTok today. Did you see that?
oh yeah, she's the worst. Yeah, well, Bonham and Helfrich put out a good letter. I think I put that in my notes.
We're clear to engage. Time on target. 5 mics. Out.
Well, welcome back to Crosstabs with Reagan Knope and Brian Iverson, our podcast. We believe is Oregon's political water cooler. We share our insights on current trends and topics backed by our decades of experience in Oregon politics. Wow, Reagan, when you come back, that's a horrible intro. You got to write a better one. Anyways, Reagan is off in the woods teaching vacation Bible school. So, like you guys heard in the last podcast, he said, "I don't know who Brian's going to have, but you have somebody else." So, I reached into my bucket of friends and I pulled Russ Walker out of the hat. And Russ, thanks for being with me here today.
Great to be here. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah. So just so you guys are aware, I don't tend to like to give everybody's like profile, but Russ has basically been a staple on the national political scene for, well, a long time. We're almost the same age, aren't we, Russ? So I think
I
we're
think
probably
so.
doing a long time. Yeah, you.
Brian, I might even be older than you.
We're in our 50s. Let's just leave it at that.
Yes.
Yeah, let's
You get above
but
50, you don't want to tell your age anymore.
yeah, isn't that the truth? It's so crazy.
Yeah.
I think Vicky turned a certain number and she was like, I don't want to party. I don't want anything. Let's just you stay out of it. Anyways, Russ has been doing this for a long time. His work has really been on the national scene. So he's run races in, 30, 40 states. He's done a lot of work in Utah. He founded and served as the executive director of Freedom Works, which you guys have heard about. Been involved in super PACs. He's done I mean, heck, even recently he wrote a book. He's kind of done everything you can do in political races, and really, Russ and I have known each other on and off over the last 20 years, and but we really got to know each other more this last cycle. He came back and he helped State Senator Kim Thatcher win a race, and the best thing that I loved about that race was that Leader Knope and I we got together with Russ. We hammered out a couple of initial thoughts and ideas on strategy and process, and then we just went and raised the money. And we just like Russ knew what he's doing. Just don't. And when you're running a caucus, when you know you have competent people running campaigns, it makes your life so much easier. So, one, thanks for winning that race and not making it a headache and some of the things that other races were, but it was fun and I'm super glad. And I know Kim's obviously glad you won that race for, and that was a minus 6D or a plus 6D seat. So carried that
Yeah.
one with ease too. I think she probably
Won it
won
by
by five
six
or
or eight
six.
percentage
Yeah.
points.
Yeah.
Eight. Yeah, I think Biden won that district. I want to say 6 or 8 points when he won it in the last election, and we ended up winning it by 6 or 7. I can't remember, but it
Well,
was
which was so great too,
big
because
swing.
you're able to carry or not carry, you didn't carry, but you worked with both the House candidates that we flipped both
Yeah.
those House seats too, which was great.
Hmm.
So Kevin Mannix won his and
Huge.
Tracy Kramer won that seat, which hasn't been in Republican hands in 22 years. So
Yeah.
I just think it was a great coordination effort by you guys to win that one. And it was just, I mean, to have somebody of your caliber coming in and I'll just a quick tidbit too when I had to go over and help the Senate with the walkout and everything, and I was kind of not really doing much, and I was just helping Vicky out when she was House Leader, and then Tim came back, and we were looking at what we needed to do on the Senate side, so I had to leave the House side to go help Tim out. I recruited Russ to come in and be Vicky's chief of staff for all of I think like a month and a half, and then
Yeah.
he's like, "Wait, there's a congressional seat going in Utah, and I gotta go," and
I
so.
know. It sucked. It sucked having but yeah, it was a special election, and it was, God, special elections are terrible. I literally lived in Utah last summer because it, you know, you got everything's truncated, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, maybe. And
So how does that work in Utah? So if it's a special election, so the guy quit or no, he died, right?
no, his wife got very, very sick, and so he
That's right.
stepped down.
He stepped down.
Yeah, he stepped down, and everything's mattered. Everything in Utah is about the primary, right? They own everything. Republicans own everything in Utah. Um, and but they have a three-phase election cycle. So they have a convention where they nominate, and then they have a primary. So someone who could get nominated in the convention may not win the primary, but gets to go straight through the primary. Everyone else to go to the primary has to collect signatures. So, the signature collection process was truncated. We had 10 days to collect the signatures. That cost us $250,000 just to collect the signatures to get them on the ballot. It was basically $20 to $25 a signature.
Wow.
And it's a first come, first serve. So if we're all collecting signatures, you know, if I get Jan Smith to sign my petition and then she signs another candidate, they're both disqualified. They're both disqualified. Well, the guy that gets it first is the only one that gets to keep the signature. So if I turn in a day before my opponent and I've got 30% of my signatures are duplicated on his, I get him, he doesn't, right? It's just this messy process. And you know, I think it's ridiculous. I think, first off, I think the signature gathering process is a financial burden and it's an obstacle to keep everyday people from accessing the ballot. And I think Utah's got a bunch of issues with their elections, but I think this is one of them. It's a system that has for decades been controlled by the elite in Utah, and they do not want to let go of it. And the signature gathering access point is their best way to keep people off the ballot.
I'm not going to digress too much into Utah. I'm just curious, does the church play in a historical domination of politics in Utah? Are they kind of, because they were a pretty dominant force, I would
Yeah.
argue, still are, but
Yeah.
but in that process, did they help write those rules or is that just,
Oh yeah, intimately involved in writing the rules. And the reason they wrote the rules is because in 2010, and I was involved in this campaign, Mike Lee, when he first ran for office, he won in convention and beat Senator Bob Bennett. Under those rules, there was no bypass of convention. If you got in the convention, only the top two vote getters went through to the primary. So if you didn't, and Bennett ended up in third place, and he was an 18-year incumbent. And so we defeated Bennett, and I was on Mike's team. We defeated Bennett in that election. And so they came back through the legislature, the church did, and the other elites in Utah, and set up this system that allows this bypass of the convention. And it has, and what it's really turned into is a barrier to entry for people who don't have the $150,000 to $200,000 to access the ballot for a congressional seat. That's a big bar.
yeah. Well, it seems like we're seeing a lot of this. I was just reading some articles this morning, and it's not even on our list to talk about it, but this idea of like ranked choice voting, open
Oh, yeah.
primaries. It seems like there's a lot of like noise out there in the world in regards to trying to, I don't know, change all of these systems because every state has its own system, right? Every state decides its own primary system, whether they're
Yeah.
open, closed, all the things. And I feel like there's a movement to one, I hate ranked choice voting, but I mean,
It's terrible.
yeah, but open primaries are interesting to me from a standpoint of as you see more and more, because some states don't even do whether Republican, Democrat, right? You just have
Yeah.
like lean R or they lean
Jungle
D
primary.
or
Yeah.
yeah.
Washington's that way.
I think open primaries are kind of interesting because like in Idaho, they have an open primary system for the Democrats. The Republicans keep it closed. It's
Yeah.
kind of interesting. I think everybody has a lot of different thoughts on what that is, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm old school when it comes to that. I think if you want to you want to vote and influence a party, you get involved with the party. You join that party. But
I'm
I'm
with you.
old school.
I'm probably with, well, we're both old school. We just determined that. Too bad Reagan's not here to give us his thoughts. He's probably got different thoughts than millennials. Um, so speaking of old school, let's talk about Trump and Biden. My first thought is I just would love to get kind of your thoughts. And we haven't talked about the assassination attempt at all on the podcast. I think it happened Saturday night, I was knee jerking around with Reagan. We were texting before he took off, and I was like, dude, we got to do an emergency pod. And he was like, well, it's national. Everybody's going to be talking about it. So
Yeah.
you probably got some insight to it. I'm sure you've had a lot of conversations about it. I think what's interesting is people tend to have fallen into two camps, it seems like. That one, this was a crazy 20-year-old loner that went and took his dad's gun and was on the dark web looking at all the crazy crap. And then, the cops sucked at taking care of Trump and he got a shot off and luckily he didn't hit and he's dead. Or
Yeah.
you go into camp two, which is all the conspiracy theories around it, that the Democrats are trying to off him. Trump was even trying to stage this so he could get the
That's a good one.
sympathy. Like, putting yourself in the line of fire seems a little crazy to me. And then I'm
Yeah.
seeing some stuff. We looked at an article here, like, it never really hit his ear, and he fell down and hit a ketchup packet on his ear to make it look like blood, and to do the bandage at the RNC that we're seeing. I don't, I think if you go down the conspiracy theory hole, you can go wherever you want to go with it, right? You can say the lack of security. So what's kind of your thoughts on it?
Yeah. So I started writing an op-ed on it. I had a friend call me. He said, Russ, because we had a conversation about it. He's like, well, why don't you put that in an op-ed? And here's what I was going to say. And I have messed with it now for 4 days, and I cannot finish the op-ed. It is terrible because my thoughts keep changing. I like to govern my thoughts by Occam's razor, right? Which is the whole concept that the argument that requires you to make the least number of assumptions is usually the one that's correct, right? So typically under that, you would look at this and you would say, well, the least amount of assumptions would make me believe that this is just a catastrophic, failure. And the law enforcement didn't do their job well. There's communication problems. Secret Service, they tasked a new team, which apparently they did. They tasked a new team. They took his normal team off and they were doing, I think they did Jill Biden's event that day. So all those things created this kind of mixture that just was a disaster. I got to tell you, I'm not saying it's a conspiracy, and I'm certainly not prepared to buy that yet, right? But there are so many weird things about this situation that just make it really weird. And I think we need to have I think the Secret Service needs to come out and really be open about what happened. FBI does. They need to involve the American people in as they move through this. I think the less transparent they are, the more people will think that it's a conspiracy, and so far they've been there's no transparency. Matter of fact, everything the Secret Service director said has been a lie. Like the roof pitch. I mean, half of what she says is just not correct. And it's obviously not correct. The two cars, they towed away two cars. Well, they said the small car was his, the van is now been towed away. There's all kinds of these weird things that have happened.
Like there's another shooter in a tree somewhere. I mean, there's just been, and you're right. I think the conspiracy theories, like you said, it'll go into the weeds.
Yeah.
They're not transparent about it. I think to your original point is that the CIA they obviously clearly whoever's running the show there is the DEI stuff is real, right? 30% female officers. I mean, we all saw the video, right? I mean, that lady couldn't holster.
It's embarrassing.
She couldn't holster a gun if her life depended on it. I mean, I feel sorry for her. She's probably, was crazy in that atmosphere of what was happening, but she's supposed to be trained to handle that situation. If you or I there, and you and I are both in the Army, we were trained for that stuff. Like that you're supposed to be able to take gunfire and react in a calm, efficient manner. And the fact that you can't even put your gun back in your holster tells me, one, you haven't had enough training, to go through it, or you're just clearly a DEI hire that shouldn't have been there in the first place. And she's somebody said this one, and I couldn't believe it. And it's so true when you look at that video, like the one lady is up there on stage. What you think she's going to carry Trump out of there? What if he got hit in the leg or the shoulder and they had to carry him? There isn't enough muscle power on that stage to get. I mean, Trump's not a small guy.
Yeah.
I mean, to get him off the stage like that, and she couldn't cover him. She's standing in front of him, and you could clearly see his face. What if there was another shooter? I think it was a complete lack of. I think it was hot out, and those law enforcement agents went inside so they could get air conditioning, and nobody thought it was real. I think it was a complete lack of law enforcement, and this kid was probably crazy. The stuff that concerns me, that gets me into the conspiracy world, is he was in a BlackRock video.
Yeah.
And that's where I start going, wait a minute, BlackRock, so was it the Democrats? Was it, gosh, Russ, I don't know, man. I tell you,
I'm literally not prepared to say what I actually think it is because I'm not certain. What I know for certain is that the Secret Service, when they found out there was a threat, should have pulled him off the stage. And every single Secret Service agent, former Secret Service agent, has said the same thing. And I've got, my brother was a sniper in Afghanistan, and there's a sniper, a Canadian sniper that did an article. They wrote an article about him, and he did a post, and they wrote an article about him in the Daily Mail, where he says there's no way that this wasn't an inside job. So I reached out to my brother and I said, have you heard of this guy? And my brother's like, yeah, I served with him in Afghanistan. And he's one of the best snipers in the entire world. And this guy this Canadian sniper does, counter assassination stuff, does protective services in Canada. I don't know enough to know whether or not there's people involved in this on the inside. What I do know is that they did not follow any protocols that they normally follow. They had this guy, he was on the threat list at 10 minutes out before Trump took the stage. They didn't do anything about it. They should have never let Trump take the stage in that environment. They didn't have any, I don't know how frequently they use drones for coverage, but, you and I both were in the Army. When you move into a defensive position, you map everything out. You map your dead zones out. So you put indirect fire on them when you can't put direct fire on them. I learned this stuff as a young infantryman, and just listening to these guys that are Secret Service guys, they say exactly the same thing. Like they always have eyes on every single spot. And a vantage point like that, it doesn't make any sense why you wouldn't have eyes on it. It just it baffles the mind. And then just the inconsistencies coming from the leadership. It's just ridiculous. Like she needs to either shut up or she needs to, think through what she says very carefully.
Well, the drone, you made a good point on the drone thing. Like that's the whole thing with having all that great tech and the drones now. When there were other ones, they used to show those drones all the time flying around the crowds.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me that a drone would have clearly, and there wasn't that many buildings. That's the part that kind of baffles me. It's like you didn't have to secure that many buildings, and it was the only building that he could have the only building he could have sat on top of and made a 150-yard shot from, which 150 yards is not.
I know. You and I both trained. Basic Army training is what, 300, almost 400 yards, 375 or something, right? Basic. You got to be able to make those shots. And I think time's going to tell on this. I think there's going to be an investigation. I do not think the FBI should do the investigation. They still haven't even figured out who dropped the cocaine at the White House. Like, you going to trust those guys to do an investigation? Like, you got to be kidding me. How many people? I've been in the White House. I've been in the White House lots of times. Like, you check in, you're escorted if you're not part of the White House staff everywhere you go inside the White House. Especially, there's the old executive office building. They'll check you in there and you wander the office. But if you go in the actual White House, you're escorted. Yeah. Right. Someone's with you. And this thing to me just stinks to high heaven. Like, I don't know. And they've got to restore confidence. This is the thing that bothers me the most about this, Brian. You have to restore confidence in these agencies. We, as American people, we have to have confidence that the FBI, when they do an investigation, are going to do it, and they're going to do it fairly, and they're not going to cover stuff up. And it's got to be the same with the CIA. Like if I was Biden or Trump, but especially Trump right now, I would hire my own security team. I'd be on the phone right now to someone like Eric Prince, and I would be like, look, man, you've got to get me a security team that can cover me.
Yeah.
And they'll work hand in hand with the Secret Service, but we got to have our own thing. I don't trust them. I mean,
Yeah.
till this is figured
I'm
out.
with you. It'll be like, okay, whoever's doing your perimeter security, one of my guys is with it. Whoever's
Hmm.
doing these are my two guys or whatever, three guys that are going to be my handlers. And
Yeah.
you can be there with us, but they're there with me,
Yeah.
and it's crazy that we have to think about that because you look at like the Secret Service and to your point, like with the agencies, you hold them as such high regard.
Yeah.
And I just feel like in the last, I would say kind of 10 years, 15 years, maybe that we just eroded some of these agencies. Like, nobody gave two craps about Department of Education. It's always sucked. But like, you're like the FBI and the CIA and the Secret Service, like these people, these men and women who give their lives to keep America safe. It's like, they're now a DEI agency. And it's
Yeah.
just, it's time for that crap to end. Like we got to be over it because what's it going to take? I mean, the only thing that I keep going back on this one is what if he was successful? Like, where would we be right now? And that scares the hell out of me, to be honest with you. It scares the
Yeah.
hell out of me more than Biden running the presidency right now.
Yeah.
I, I don't know what would have happened. I don't know what things would look like at the RNC this week. Like, where would our country be if
Yeah.
Trump would have been laying dead on that podium? I have no idea.
Well, and I think the most troubling thing for me, because I do lean towards this was just a catastrophic error, right? And which is another reason why Trump should have his own team, because until they clean things up at the Secret Service, I would be uncomfortable with the current environment we're in with this DEI stuff. But the response from people on the left has been the most shocking thing to me. You think there's a group of people out there that thinks that they're upset that the shooter missed, right? Like
Yeah.
somehow we would be a better nation if Trump had been assassinated last Saturday. I guarantee you we would not be a better nation. And not only that, I would never in a million years wish for any of my political opponents to be assassinated. And the fact that there's anybody who's on social media saying this, and people like these jokes, like, okay, I'm willing to accept some of these people are just kind of getting out of control with their jokes, but dude, I'm telling you, like I know someone, and the response to this was, well, did they kill him?
Yeah.
And that's someone I've known for a long time. And I was not there when this person responded that way, but someone very close to my family was, and it was shocking that was the response, like a hopeful, that Trump was somehow taken out of the picture. That kind of that's crazy.
Well, you mean like Cass McLeod Skinner, Jamie McLeod Skinner's wife, who, posted it on Twitter. I mean, or X. I mean,
Hmm.
and good on Senator Bonham and Representative Helfrich for they sent a letter to Governor Kotek because she's like the director of some board or something, and they just like she got to go.
She does
Like,
have to go.
and if Governor Kotek doesn't remove her like by next week, I think it's a problem.
Yeah.
And Governor Kotek responded well to the assassination attempt. All the Democrats
Yep.
across the board, talked about it, and it was the right response because I wouldn't want to see Joe Biden assassinated either. Like,
It was
there's no way
horrible.
on any planet because we
Yeah.
can't have that in America. We got to sit here and argue across the table, and we can argue till the cows come home that abortion and these hot ticket items. We got to have those arguments, but not in a way that I want to actually kill somebody because of their views.
Yeah.
I think this is boiled up over, and I think both sides have a little bit to blame on this, on the political rhetoric, from the Antifa on the hard left and their craziness that they've been
Yeah.
doing, increasing their political violence, to even some of our far right groups, that on the right that has, I think, gotten out of control. Some of those groups that I just don't
Yeah.
think that what they're doing isn't helpful.
Yeah.
So I think that's really where the problem is. So both of our extremes have really been the big problem because most of us that are kind of beating each other up in the middle, it's usually over policy, right? We're not beating each
Yeah.
other up because we think that somebody's Hitler, but when you can't
Yeah.
call Trump Hitler for, the last year in political rhetoric and somebody
Yeah.
thinking if you could have went back and killed Hitler before
Yes.
Hitler became Hitler, a lot of people say that probably would have been a good thing. So
We
in some
justified.
young 20-year-old's mind, he was probably thinking he's being a hero.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, right? Is so when he's already predisposed to maybe those hard, extreme, mentalities that's and then it's taken into action. It
Yeah.
has nothing to do with gun control. It has nothing to do with any of that sort of stuff. It's just you can't resort to violence. We're not Africa. We're not a third world country that shoots their leader every 3 months. It's
Yeah.
just not. It's not us, and we got to get over it. And people that are out there on Twitter or they're saying anything, talk. This is the one thing where they should be canceled. You
Yeah.
know,
Well, there should be at least a public shaming of them, right? So,
yeah,
I mean, it's just not who we are. It's not part of our tradition, and it never should be. And um, we're a better country because we can sit across the table at Thanksgiving and have a conversation about politics with family members we disagree with, but we still
yeah,
love deeply, right? And I have a sister. She just disagrees with me on everything in politics. But you know what? I was with her last weekend, and we got together for my parents' 60th anniversary, and I love my sister to death, and she loves me, and there's no politics getting in the way of that. And that's the way it should be in this country.
yeah.
These are our communities, you know?
I agree 100%. I think that's really, and I have, I got an aunt and a couple of cousins and friends that are all Democrats, right? And they
Yeah.
just despise Trump. But not one of them
Dude.
has said, I wish he was dead.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
They just want him to go away. They don't want him to die, right? They don't want to assassinate him. They just don't want
Yeah.
him. They don't like him because he represents everything I think that they hate about their own candidate,
Yeah.
to be honest. I think that there's a lot of things in Trump that they just because he calls things out the way they are, that he doesn't do it right. It was the same thing like everybody wanted him to pick, to the VP candidate, right? I mean, everybody's talking, oh, you need Burgum or you need Youngkin, or I think I even said Youngkin would have been a good pick for him and stuff. And Trump just does it his way and it drives people crazy. And
Yeah.
he comes out and says, no, actually, you know what? I want JD Vance. And
Yeah.
and JD Vance was critical of Trump. I mean, wasn't a real big fan. And then he started, I think, learning more about why Trump does and says and does things the way he does them, because Trump has a political acumen that I
Yeah.
think most people just don't have.
Yeah.
And he's got a gut feeling about stuff that is way beyond some people, especially, and you know this better than most, inside the Beltway there's just a churn and kind of thing that happens inside DC where, well, you got to pick this person or you got to pick this.
Yeah.
And he said, no, I don't want a DEI candidate. I'm not going to pick a woman because you think I need to have a woman. I'm not going to pick a black guy just because he's black. I'm not going to pick Marco Rubio because he's Hispanic, right? He goes, I want to pick somebody. I guess you could maybe make the argument that JD Vance is a younger person or something, but I think the idea was like, no, I want somebody who is ready to lead the country, to understand the way I do things, and maybe and pick there on JD Vance. And I haven't done a lot of research on JD Vance, but the more that I've learned about the guy, the more I'm like, dude, I'm on board with the JD Vance train. So I think it's
Oh, I
great.
am. Look, I had people reach out to me and say, "What do you know about JD Vance?" And I don't know JD. I've never met JD Vance, but um, they were uncomfortable with the things he had said. And I reminded him, I said, "Look, I worked for Mike Lee. I've worked with Mike Lee off and on since 2010. And in 2016, Mike Lee was not a fan of Trump. Matter of fact, he led the entire Utah delegation in protest off the floor of the RNC during convention because they decided they weren't going to support Trump. They were supporting Cruz.
Yeah.
And it was a big act. And I disagreed with what he did. But Mike is now one of the greatest defenders of Mike Lee is now one of the greatest defenders of the president and the president's agenda. He has come completely full circle and is supporting the president now wholly, and that's what JD is, and that's what President Trump has done. President Trump has literally been able to convert a lot of people who were opposed to him initially to being big fans and big supporters of his. And I know a ton of these people in DC who work in the think tanks that I've worked with for 25 years and never thought Trump was committed to the ideas. And what they've learned over the last 8 years is that he's not only committed, he's done more to keep his promises than any other president they've ever worked with. And I know I feel that way. Like, I mean, Bush gave us a lot of lip service, and I like Bush as a person, but man, I mean, I felt like it was all lip service, look at No Child Left Behind. It was terrible. No Child Left Behind was a disaster. And it was supposed to be a educational choice bill that was going to fundamentally change education in this country. And it didn't. Instead, it was really Ted Kennedy's bill. Bush let it get gut and stuffed by Ted Kennedy, and then turned around and went out and sold it as his own bill, knowing it was garbage and knowing it didn't do anything that he promised to do. And, so I'd much rather have, Donald Trump, who tells me things are in an uncomfortable way and makes me feel a little uncomfortable with how he speaks. But at the end of the day, does everything he can to keep his promises. And if his promises aren't fulfilled, he turns to the American people and says, I'm sorry I wasn't able to get that done,
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I think that's why JD Vance, although, man, I tell you what, I don't know if you watched the CNN coverage after JD's speech last night, but I was watching CNN and I was stunned at the things they were saying. And I think they nailed it, which is this guy has got such a great story, and not just a great story, but he genuinely is this person. He's a person that fights for the forgotten man. And, that Trump does the same thing, but JD's story is just different. I mean, this is, it's a great story.
Well, his story coming from nothing, right? I mean, literally a pile of trash is what he was living in, and being raised by his grandma. And I mean, his mom, mom being there last night, even when he was speaking, and just going through that, all of that to be successful, to go to the military, to say that there was a path. And when I was in the military, and you probably had this, and I'm sure JD saw, there was a lot of JD Vances in the military. There was a lot of guys that I was in, because I had a middle class upbringing, right? My dad was a small business owner, and we did fine. We had a house, went on camping trips and things like that. No lavish vacations, but I had two parents that were married. They ended up getting divorced, I think, when we all left the house, and they looked at each other, didn't like each other anymore. But they were together like nearly 30 years, I think, 20 years or so. So I had good parents. They did what they were supposed to do. They gave me all the things that I needed to do to be successful. I had to go do it. But man, the stories that you hear in the military.
Oh, yeah.
They were JD Vance stories, man. Like they were, you talk to guys and they're like, it was either the military or I was going to be dead by the time I was 19 on the streets of LA, or I was going to be, and I think the military was a great spot for a lot of those people to go. And I've seen a lot of those guys, and wasn't a lot of girls when I was in the military, but especially in, actual armament units. The units I were in, there was no women allowed yet. So it was just different, right? But that was a spot for them to go. And JD, I think, said it, and he was affected by 9/11. And I was lucky. I was out of the military. I was past my 4-year reserves before 9/11 hit. And, but I would have went back if they would have called. But I think that JD, that affected him in a way. And he joined, the Marines and went and fought. And then it just it opens your eyes up to a different world. And then going to law school and marrying an immigrant, that her parents were immigrants from India. It's amazing story. And I think it's something that the left is really going to hate, is because everything that he is who I think our party represents. Like this idea that you can make it in America. Like if you, I don't care what you're born in, any sort of poverty, you can make it, and JD's and his wife is I think probably helped him. Like my wife has helped me become a
Yeah.
better. My parents weren't very good at like grooming me and learning how to do the certain things
Yeah.
and open doors for women and stuff like that. My wife is, she's trained me. I'm a little better now, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
The same, I saw that with JD's wife. He's talked about that, and
Yeah.
he's probably got a lot of growing to do. But the one knock on that I saw on CNN is they were just kind of bitching, moaning, complaining about that he doesn't have the experience.
Yeah.
And I I sat there and I go, well, wait a minute, was it Barack Obama in the Senate for only a year and a half before
Hmm.
all of a sudden he
Yeah.
found himself at the top of the ticket and became president? I mean,
Yeah.
but you know, Brock was a community organizer, so he
Yeah.
have a lot of experience in a
Yeah.
state senator. But I just find that knock is a little disingenuous. And I did watch a little bit of the CNN coverage, and I forget who it was that said it because he really just said, "Well, while the Republicans are unifying and coming together, the
Oh yeah.
Democrats are splintering," and I think they're concerned. The only good part about the assassination attempt is it got the Biden, stuff off
Yeah.
the
Headlines.
right, and
You
so
guys.
they weren't going after him. But I still think they're working on him behind the scenes. So, well, since we're talking about the RNC stuff, was there? Have you've watched all the speeches and everything,
I
or at
have
least most of
every
them?
one of
I
them.
imagine.
Yeah. It's the
What?
first. It's the first RNC I haven't been to since 2000, and I was supposed to be there, and I unfortunately I had meetings I couldn't cancel. I had to
That's
get
when
to.
I first texted you, and I was like, "Hey, you're probably at the RNC."
Yeah.
But you were like, "Oh no, I'm
Bummer.
around." Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I've sat. I mean, I've sat on the platform convention 3 times. I've been on the credentialing convention committee, excuse me, twice, and I've been to 6 conventions. So it's
Wow.
yeah, it's definitely interesting. I'll say this. I think that speeches have been amazing. Of course, I'm biased. I'm a Republican, right? So
Sure.
I'm pleased by what I'm hearing, but I think the unity of it is off the charts. And I did this post. Um, I remember being there in 12, and Mitt Romney was the nominee, and Mitt Romney would not allow Ron Paul to speak.
Yeah.
And Ron Paul wanted like 2 minutes. And Ron Paul had this rally out at Southern Florida University. And I went out to it because I like Ron Paul. I'm a big supporter of Ron Paul. And I went out to the rally, and it was the basketball arena was packed. So it's probably an arena that held 12 to 15,000 people. And it was completely packed. And there were rock bands and playing, and the place was booming, and everybody was 20 to 35 years old.
Wow.
And I remember just thinking the energy of this place is off the charts. And then I went back to the RNC where Romney was, and it was just the opposite. Bunch of old people with blue hair, it was like just what you would think is a typical RNC. It was
Yeah.
still fun. I mean, it was still a fun party, but I think Romney missed the opportunity to unite the party. And I think he missed the opportunity to expand the base. And this is not something Donald Trump's doing. Like you see the speakers, every speaker, man. I mean, I didn't like what the Teamster Union president said, but to have the Teamster Union president there, hey, okay, I'm okay with this. I don't agree with what he's saying, but some of the stuff I do. Vulture capitalism's bad. Crony capitalism is bad.
Yeah.
Rent seeking is bad. Like, those are things that every Republican should agree with. He said them, and he's not wrong. We
Yeah.
shouldn't just blanket support corporations because sometimes they behave badly, right?
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I mean, for me, I walk away from this convention just going, man, it is amazing how they've united the party. Haley, Vivek, all these opponents that everyone said we're gonna tear the party apart. Even DeSantis. I think they all. I mean, some of them gave better speeches than others, definitely, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you. I really thought the Teamster one, the guy there, I was kind of shaking my head a few times when he was saying some of the stuff he was saying. And but you're right, he was invited, which is odd, right? Because I think what they're seeing, like I would imagine many of their rank and file Teamster union people are voting for Trump.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure the Teamsters were like, well, you know, I'm gonna go. But I thought his message was a little off, but
Yeah,
that was probably near the bottom of mine. I thought Nikki Haley showing
same.
up was great. I
Yeah,
thought that she did a great job of just basically making it very clear that she supports Donald Trump, and I think that was good. DeSantis knocked it out of the park. I thought he hit kind of the angles he wanted to hit, which again, for Trump to allow them to just even show up, these guys that
Yeah.
were, against him. And then of course Vivek, I mean, that guy
You know,
he's
he's
got a
awesome.
way with words that are,
He's-
I just, part of it's delivery of
yeah.
how he does it, but how he can take everything you're feeling and put it into a ba
Yep.
ba 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 ba,
Mhm.
amazing orator.
Yeah.
I sure hope to see more from him in the future. I hope he becomes a staple of our future because he's not much older than JD Vance. So I mean,
Yeah. No,
I
he's like 40.
because in 4 years we're gonna have an open ticket regardless of who wins, right? We're gonna have
Yeah.
open tickets on both sides. So we're gonna see a lot of people emerging. And I really thought the other one, I thought Kai Trump did really well.
Yeah.
His granddaughter, that was last night. I thought she was really relatable. She was real.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed her. Laura Trump, you probably know her. It was a little stale to me,
Yeah.
just to be on the real side of stuff. But I don't think she's not really a
Yeah.
public
Same
speaker.
way.
She's doing wonders with the RNC stuff. I think
Yep.
that's just great what they're doing there, and they're organizing. So a lot of those speeches are there for
Yep.
because they just people need to see who they are and what they're doing, and some are there to rouse up the base. I've been I haven't been to an RNC convention. I was gonna go in 20.
Yeah.
Um, that
Six
has
of us got to go to that one.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks, COVID. I know. Yeah, you were part of that, right? Vicky
Yeah,
was
there's only six
chair
of
of
us that got
the
to go. It was crazy.
Vicky
Weirdest
being the
convention
co-chair of
ever.
the Trump campaign, and
Yeah.
we were going to go and hang
Yeah.
out and have some fun. I was like, oh, we'll go because it'll be kind of fun and
Yeah.
get to go to different things. I've never really had a desire because, like you, I usually go to those things and it's nothing but blue hairs and the folks that
Yeah.
it's not really my scene. And then I could have gone this time, and I just didn't. I was invited to go with a couple different groups, and I just didn't. Vicky and I just didn't really. I got a lot of stuff I'm doing here. I'm working on
Yeah.
campaigns, actually trying to win, and
Yeah.
losing a week to go do that stuff. But seeing some of the speeches kind of makes me a little jealous that I wasn't there to see
Yeah.
them in person because there is a certain energy. I think when you're watching it on TV, you don't get to hear the crowd and the people behind them like you did there. But it was
Yeah.
good. I think we've done a pretty good job of bringing that unity. I think Trump really has nailed the unity thing. I think that's really important to me. And my biggest takeaway, I was going to say, is JD Vance's speech like last night, and I watched that one, and I really loved he called it the Green New Scam instead
Yeah.
of the Green New Deal that the
Yeah.
Democrats have been pushing with everything. And it's so true. Like we're seeing in Oregon with all the solar, wind, everything green, green, green. Oh, it's a whole new industry. And I'm like, it's a complete scam.
Yeah.
That whole deal is a scam. Like we would have lower energy prices, the whole 9 yards if we would just drill. And they were
Yep.
chanting baby drill. But it's a scam. And I see it in Oregon. Like we have these solar companies that are coming in Oregon that are all hedge funds.
Mm-hmm.
They're all people with a bunch of money and they're coming in and they're just scamming us.
Yes.
They're making you think that it's great and you're saving the planet by putting acres and acres of solar fields into rural Oregon, stealing our land so
Yep.
they can make, millions of dollars. And then what they're doing is they're buying off Democrat and Republican legislators in Oregon. And I think it's horrible. I think
Yep.
that the solar companies that are doing this sort of stuff, the solar developers are bad actors. And I think
Yep.
it's all part of the Green New Scam.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, not to go down a, rabbit hole here, but I 100% agree with you. I think there's so many problems with what we've done with windmills and with solar. And most of it is just the redistribution of tax dollars from my pocket to the pocket of a big corporation that has the ability to manipulate that process and take advantage of all those
Mhm.
government subsidies.
Like
Knowing
BlackRock, right?
yeah, like
BlackRock's one of
BlackRock,
them.
knowing that energy production is never going to meet what it promises to do. And it's it look, I'll give you my couple takeaways. Number one, I think that the two speeches that were most moving to me was the mother who lost her son to fentanyl. It literally brought me to tears. And then the Abbey Gate Gold Star parents. Those
Yeah.
two things like you mentioned in the book, we just wrote a book and we talk about Abbey Gate. And we talk about, in the book, we talk about exactly why the sniper didn't take out the target. And I'd love to come back on podcast and just do a podcast on Afghanistan and bring my partner on. But man, I'm telling you, that those two were the most moving. The second thing that I think was really the big takeaway for me is this is Donald Trump's party. And I don't mean Donald Trump as in just Donald Trump. I mean as MAGA. Like the party is not the same party of George W. Bush. When George W. Bush owned the party, it was a globalist party. It was we are going to support free trade regardless of how much it hurts the United States. We are going to go to war and we are going to transform. It was a neocon party. We are going to convert the world to be democracies. And this party is not that party. This is a America First party. If it is not going to benefit the United States, we are not going to do it. We are not going to trade with partners that literally subsidize. Like, I remember Canada did this. And I remember having conversations with some of our timber owners here in Oregon. Canada was subsidizing the cost of timber, dropping the prices below what was competitive, and undermining our own timber industry in Oregon. And because we were committed to this religion of free trade, we were doing it knowing they were cheating, right? And we were selling our timber for what it cost us, and they were subsidizing their timber. Once they wiped our markets out, they didn't let the prices go back up. And we have dealt with this all over the world. And I'm telling you, those are the big trade. This is the America First party. And I don't know when that's going to change, but I'm telling you, Donald Trump's that way. And so is JD Vance. JD Vance is 100% America First. And, some people call him a populist. You can call him all kinds of stuff. But bottom line is, if it does not benefit the citizens of the United States, we are not doing it. We're not sending our boys to go die overseas for your vision of what you think should. I mean, every single one of these overseas expeditions has failed. Every single one.
Yeah.
And I was adding up the numbers. I was talking to my wife about it last night. 8,000 contractors died. We never talk about the contractors that died in Afghanistan and Iraq. 8,000 contractors. 7,000 soldiers, American soldiers, died in those two wars. And we tend to pretend that contractors, they just get like left out, like they're Americans too,
Yeah.
They signed up to drive a truck and ended up dying over in some shithole in Afghanistan or Iraq. And now Iraq is a proxy state for Iran, our enemy. And Afghanistan is reoccupied by the terrorists. Those are catastrophic failures. And no one is requiring George W. Bush. I worked for Dick Armey. And I remember Dick Armey, and he would not be upset for me saying this. We had multiple conversations about this. Dick Armey said Dick Cheney lied to him. And his biggest regret as being a majority leader in the U.S. House of Representatives was that he went along with that lie because he believed Dick Cheney when Dick Cheney said Iraq has weapons of mass destruction.
Mm-hmm.
And he says to this day, it was the biggest mistake of my life because it led to the Patriot Act. It led to all this other stuff. And a total violation of our civil liberties. And so I think, man, I got to tell you, this is one of the things I'm most excited about this administration is that kind of nonsense is going to end. We're going to move to a different place.
It sure feels like the isolationist kind of more mentality coming from Trump, especially he was always against Iraq, right? I mean, there was no world wars while Trump was in office. I mean, it's kind of that peace through strength mentality that I think he's always had that he pulled from Reagan, which was smart. But your book is called Failure of Leadership. It's available on Amazon. So yes, we'll definitely have you and your partner come back and talk about it because I think it's a fascinating story about the withdrawal of Afghanistan. And the title really talks about Biden in a way of just this idea that he's not in charge, right? It's a failure of leadership. I mean, you want a commander in chief who ultimately can say the buck stops here.
Yeah.
And if you're going to go to war or you're going to do some sort of withdrawal, like even withdrawing from war is as critical as going to war.
Yeah.
because you can withdraw really badly, and a lot of people can die because of it. We saw that in Vietnam as well, right? The withdrawal from
Yep.
Vietnam was catastrophic. And
Catastrophic.
and so it has to be as thought through as much as it is when you actually go to war, instead of just doing it so a bunch of people can make money. And I am definitely not on board with that. So I'm looking forward
Yeah.
to Trump. Speaking of failure of leadership, Biden has COVID.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
really, this is one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on, because I think you know how all this stuff works on the national stage. So there still is clearly a desire to push him out, but it seems like they've hit a stalling point to where, with everything, with their rules and everything, is that Biden would have to pull himself out of the mix at this point. There's really no way of, and maybe you can clue me in on what is, if he doesn't, it's, let's just say the powers that be, because it's clearly not Biden, so Obama's team, if they clearly want to get rid of him, like,
Yeah.
how do they do that if Biden's not a willing partner? Is there a path?
Yeah, there's not. This is the problem. So the way it works at convention, and I can't remember exactly how many delegates the Democrat convention has. The Republican convention has roughly 2,500 from around the country, and it's based on population size and then the population of Republicans in your state. So there's 26 from Oregon, but literally out of Texas, there's like several hundred. There's a couple hundred. So the Democrats have the same thing, right? They have, I think, 3,500 S. They also have super delegates that are what are called unbound. A bound delegate means if I go to the convention, I have to vote for Donald Trump. If I'm a Donald Trump delegate, I have to vote for Donald Trump. If I'm from the state of Oregon, it's in statute. I have to vote for him 2 rounds in Oregon. So other states, some aren't bound at all. They could do what they want. Others are bound for 1 round. Others are bound for maybe more. So the problem that the Democrats have is, if Biden does not what's called free his delegates, say, okay, you're free to support who you want. So what happened in the Romney convention was Ron Paul was trying to get the other candidates' delegates to support him when they were unbound. And this pissed Romney off, right? And this is one of the reasons Romney wouldn't let him speak. It's the same thing Cruz did. Cruz did this against Trump in 2016, right? He's gonna take his delegates, try to get the other delegates, like Carson's delegates. We had some delegates out of the Carson campaign. Once we unbound them, they were free to support whoever they want, but we asked them to support Trump. So in this case, by statute in most of these states, most of these delegates are bound within the Democrat Party. So if he does not release them, they will vote for him. It's an automatic vote for him that first round, and he will be the nominee
because he won the primary, right? So
yes, because he won the primary.
Because of that. Okay.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody else won a single delegate in the Democrat primary. There were several candidates, but I don't think any of them had enough to win a delegate, right? Which, this is what you get. The Democrat Party cries about democracy, but they do not believe in democracy. They pushed everybody out of that primary that could have been a threat to Biden. They want to give him a clean pathway. That is not democratic. Like, that's the opposite of democratic, right? It's the kind of stuff the Soviet Union would do. One candidate, but we have a democracy. Everyone gets to vote for this one candidate, right? So so they're in a bind. I think he's going to release them. I got text this morning from people I trust that said he's going to be out by Monday. So he will probably use COVID and this health scare, because he's not looking good. I mean, I don't know if you saw him going up the steps to the plane. He looked terrible. And then
every
down,
time he goes up or down steps, I just stop. Yeah. And I pause and I look, like, is he going to fall? Is the Trump golf ball going to come in and hit him in the head and knock him over? Probably my favorite Instagram memes. I'm with you. I feel like, enough people, there was reports coming out that him and Nancy Pelosi were yelling at each other on the phone recently, and she's got a lot of power within the Democrat Party. Amazingly, again, roughly the same age, but it's pretty interesting. That's just the difference. It's not an age thing. It's just a mental acuity thing that, it happens. It's going to happen to all of us at some point. in our lives, if you live long enough, you're gonna get some dementia and all the things, right? But I really think that you're right. I think the COVID thing is like, oh, they're gonna have to make a story, right? Because Joe's
Yeah.
just not gonna quit. There's no way that Jill and Joe and his inner circle people are just gonna say, especially now when he's put his back up, that he's just gonna quit. And
Yeah.
just because I don't think if you're not fit to run for office, this is my only fear with it, is I don't think you're fit to be president.
I totally
So
agree. 100%.
how does he back out of all of that is really the part that
Yeah.
I'm curious about how that plays out, but I think the COVID thing is like a precursor to, do we now hide him and then we just start rolling out the PR, right? Like, oh,
Yeah.
he's this, oh, he's gotten really sick, and oh, and then they just call it, because the whole, unless you quit to spend more time with your family, which
Yeah.
means you had an affair.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
that's the PR move, right? Spend more time
Yeah.
with your family.
It's
Or
funny.
medical reasons.
Yeah.
Usually mean medical reasons mean they don't want you there, and it's an easy,
Yeah.
because then nobody really questions it. And I think with Biden, nobody would really question a medical scenario at this point if he just says, you know what, my doctors and my wife, and I'm not going down a path that I think I can lead the country, and I'm going to step aside. And
Yeah.
because
Well, and
he,
they're in a bad spot because there's this other piece of it, which is Kamala controls the money. So Biden controls the money as long as he's in it. The minute he's out, then goes to Kamala because she's the only one on the paperwork besides him.
so the suit, because that's super PAC money, right? So on a
No,
super,
that's just the campaign FEC funds. Like
okay.
they're literally their campaign account is his name's on it and her name's on it. So if he's out, then she controls it wholly.
So
And no one
all
else.
so that it goes through Kamala, so she ultimately gets that $100 million,
Yeah,
and
200
then
million,
she
whatever
decides
they
what
have.
she wants to do with it.
Uh-huh. And so they can't, the DNC controls like there's like certain amount of money that goes to the DNC and
Sure.
goes to, the super PAC money's different, of course, too. And any other, any of these other like affiliated Democrat PACs, there's several of them. The RNC does the same thing. Like there's a bunch of money that goes to the RNC because you're limited. I can only give $3,300 per election to I can only give, limited what I can give to the candidate, but I can give a much larger check to the RNC,
Yeah.
right? Um, so, but that's a big chunk of money. That's a couple $100 million, from what I understand. And so they can't just sidestep Kamala, and she's not going to let him sidestep her. And she's not a great candidate. She's a terrible candidate.
No, I
Like
think she polls worse than Biden, I think, against Trump.
yeah, she's terrible. Well, and she's not competent. This is her biggest
Yeah.
problem. Like, you could argue Biden about, back in the day, whether or not he made good decisions. I think his decisions were terrible. But, no one's going to argue whether or not he was quote unquote competent. She's totally incompetent. Like she's a clown. And people that work for her, she's toxic. Like I know someone in DC who was next door neighbors with one of her chief of staffs and good friend of mine, and they would talk. And Kamala is totally toxic. Like she goes through staff like crazy.
Yeah.
And I think she's toxic because she's incompetent and she knows she's incompetent. And so she's compensating for incompetence by being mean,
Mhm.
which is what a lot of these people
Biden
do.
does that too a little bit.
Mhm.
And even on US Senate level, I mean, you could kind of hide in a bubble.
Yeah.
You kind of, kind of hide yourself to where you can kind of get through until you get that spotlight. Even as VP, she's been able to kind of hide a little bit. And whenever they put the spotlight on her, the word salad that comes out of her mouth is just insane. And I think you put her on a stage with Trump for a
Yeah.
debate.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not even, I mean, her and JD Vance would be very
Yeah.
interesting from that standpoint. But you're right. I'm curious to see what will happen. I definitely think I just don't know how they sidestep Kamala. I
Yeah.
just don't know how that happens when Biden steps aside. She controls the money. I still think they can do this fun, because it's probably not a bad idea to do these mini like 3-week debates with, 5, 7, 8 people, Democrats. They control the narrative, they control the news.
Yeah.
Go to an open primary, which won't be that open because they'll be their person, whoever they want to
Yeah.
win. Because now if those are unsecured ballots, right, and they open them up, then the machine gets in there. But I don't know how Kamala, if she's not invited to that stage, she has to be part of that process
She
because
does.
she'll be the president. Because I think she has to take over the presidency. I think I don't know.
I think the shoes fall if he steps down, which I look, the part of me still says he's not going to, because he's got all these legal problems with his family, right? Hunter's a mess, and Hunter's got this other case that's coming up in California. You've got Jill, who is just, she's narcissistic. It's all about her.
Yeah.
And then you got Joe, and then this is something that rarely gets talked about. You got the whole political team behind him. Like, Joe's political team is different than Kamala's political team, and different than Obama's political team, and different than Clinton's political team. And there's some overlap with some of those, but my understanding is that Joe's political team does not like Obama's political team. They do not like each other. And there's a bunch of people in Joe's team that literally are going to get the paycheck of their life coming out of this campaign. And now you're telling them you don't get your turn? Like, you get one. I mean, I've worked on a presidential before, and they don't come every day. And there's a lot of money to be made in a presidential by the top dogs. And you can't tell me Joe's people aren't like, you're staying in this. If we have to will you in, we got to strap you to a dolly and will you in there and put a microphone in your mouth. Put a speaker in your mouth. You're gonna go, because there's money there. And I just don't believe. Part of me finds it really hard to believe they're going to step away. They're going to have to buy a lot of people out to get this to happen. And Democrats are capable of doing that. They do that kind of stuff all the time. But give jobs, maybe give them a job in the campaign where they're not really a decision maker, but they're going to make a bunch of money, stuff like that.
Yeah, buy them off. That's what they'll have to do. Well, think about it. Karl Rove has made an entire lifetime career of money off of winning one race, so good for Karl Rove. He did it different and they won the race, but that's to your point, not only the money they make on the campaign itself, but every campaign they get to do after that, their rates now triple.
Yeah.
Because they can say, I won this race or I won that race. For president, it's a huge different deal. Well, hey, I'm going to switch gears because I don't want to go too long, but let's just talk some state news. I would love to get your take on this. Because you still live in Oregon, Russ. I know you're always out and about, but it's still, you still care about your home state. So one of my favorite senators, President Peter Courtney, passed away just this week. And I, obviously this was the seat that Kim Thatcher just won. So Courtney was obviously a staple. 20 years as Senate President, was in the legislature forever. I truly just enjoyed his presence in a room. It was just amazing to me. And I had the opportunity to talk with him a few times. And I always remember it ever since when Vicky was leader and he was still Senate President. We went in and met with him. Vicky had to talk to him on something. Session wasn't even in. We just happened to be in the Capitol and he was there. And we walk in and he just goes, something to the point of like, when are you going to get rid of this guy? Says it to me, right? Like, you're way too good looking to have, somebody like him dragging you down. And but he just did it in such, tongue in cheek jest kind of thing that just put you off. I just loved his mentality in the Capitol was so great. He kept things from going so far to the left. He kind of had the Oregon way mentality. Him and Betsy Johnson were like the two biggest personalities in that Capitol, especially on the Senate side. They were such big personalities. I really felt like this was part of the problem when Peter, retired. I think there was this weird, and then Betsy Johnson went and ran for governor. You had this weird like vacuum of personality, like were just gone. Like people didn't even know who the other Democrat senators were on that side of the building. And to the point to where, and then, where Rob Wagner became Senate President, And President Wagner, people are like, well, who's this Rob Wagner guy? And he's like, well, I've been majority leader. And everybody's like, well, nobody even knew, right? It was kind of, I mean, you knew if you were inside the bubble, but outside of that, you just,
Yeah.
Peter Courtney ran everything. And I think that was a real challenge for President Wagner to kind of take on. I mean, it's really hard to follow somebody that has
Yeah.
done it for so long. And same when you had Betsy Johnson and him always kind of really running the show.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know if you knew.
Yeah. I did know Peter, and I didn't know him really well. I mean, I knew him mostly as kind of an opponent, right?
Yeah.
But you can respect your opponents. And I remember when I was doing a lot of work in Oregon, this is back in the early 2000s till about 2009-ish. And from, 99 to 2009, about a decade. And, there's the thing I always admired about Peter Courtney was, and others, there were others at that time period back then, that were this way, but they were not afraid to reach across the aisle and work with Republicans, and not just work with Republicans, but treat them with respect, knowing that they're the minority party, and be willing to bring them into the process and say, okay, we're gonna re-envision this tax bill. Can you come in and be part of it? And during that time period, I did a lot of work on taxes, and fought some big taxes. Governor Kulongoski, I feel was kind of the same way. And I mean, I'd kill to have a Governor Kulongoski in Oregon again.
Right.
I really would, and it would be a blessing. And I think there's a lot of Democrats that feel the same way. I mean, and this is kind of the crappy thing about losing someone like Peter Courtney was, we have now gone to this extreme version of the Democrat Party, and they're trying to do things that aren't reflective of all the Democrats I know. And I know a lot of Democrats. I coach football with them. My kids played baseball with their kids, and we're friends. But man, they don't agree with where the stuff's going, and they agree with where Peter Courtney was.
Yeah.
And it kind of sucks because I wish we had more people like that. But it's his legacy. I mean, the guy's got a legacy that's off the charts. Especially in the Salem Kaiser area. Always been a big part of these communities. And I've been out. Taught at Western for years, Western Oregon University, and he's well thought about there. I think he taught my daughter when my daughter was in college. He taught one of the classes she took. So I mean, I've got to. It's too bad because we've had a long legacy of having these kinds of people in Oregon on both sides of the party, both parties. In other states they might be considered as too moderate, right?
And he wasn't moderate. I mean, he was convicted. Like there was certain things that Peter didn't like horse racing in Oregon, right? Peter there was certain things that he was very convicted in. But I think to your point, like he would say, hey, what don't you like about this bill? Like instead of like, no, we're just going to we have the votes, we're shoving this bill through. It was like he'd go to the Republicans and just say, well, can we find a way to get this one, this one through? Can we, what is I just think that sort of give and take, let's sit at the table and figure it out. I hope there's some Democrats out there. I know there's some, I won't name them because they'll probably get upset if I name them or you and I talk about it. But I know there's some out there that want more of the Peter Courtney kind of mentality in the legislature. I think I'm hoping that his legacy that will ring true. And we saw some of that, I think, with the Measure 110 stuff in the short session. We saw the Democrats come to the table and say, all right, you're right. We need to fix this. So let's sit down and fix it. I think campaign finance reform is another one where we're going to have to, I think we still have some more hashing out to do there. I don't think that one's done, but the big stuff, I think that is really the key. The little things don't matter as much if they're district specific, but when you're changing the nature of something in the state, I think that's where you need to have pragmatic leaders willing to hear what the other side is and not just force you into a corner. And that was Peter. Yeah. I think his legacy. I hope we name some bridges after him and some other things. And
schools.
I hate it when they don't make those, like they stop naming things in schools after people, because that stuff matters, man. You do this stuff for a
Yeah,
long time,
I agree.
it makes a difference. Well, speaking of the Democrat Party, we got a lot of Democrat news. So the Oregon Department of Justice will not seek criminal charges into a $500,000 political contribution made to the Democratic Party of Oregon. From our friends at OPB, there was an article. So they
Yeah,
were prompted to take a look, if you guys remember this, that the FTX people gave $500,000 to the Democrat Party of Oregon, who then turned around and spent that on a bunch of mailers that in effect went down and beat some of our candidates in 2022 when they just basically said, yeah, we're not even going to seek any criminal charges, when the FTX guys all went. I don't know, is Sam Bankman-Fried, I guess he's in jail right at this point.
yeah,
So
he's in jail now. Yeah,
all of that, and they know that, and they had campaign finance. They basically, I know that the Oregon Democratic Party didn't file it till after, because they didn't want anybody to know about it. So they took that hit, for filing afterwards.
yeah,
I was really hoping that they would crack down on this stuff, because this goes into my campaign finance scenario. Until people trust the system on some level, people are going to distrust everything about the system. And so you can't have campaign finance reform and have things like this, because now what's going to happen, the whole point of our system in Oregon is that everything has to be transparent. You can give as much as you want.
yeah,
You can even come from FTX, and who cares, but it's got to be transparent, right? You got
yeah,
to report it. And I think the campaign finance system that we seem to be barreling towards is going to move everything into independent expenditures. And in other states, and especially on the federal stuff, everything, well, you're the IE guy. I mean, super
yeah,
PACs abound. We're going to see ads now where you're not going to know the FTX gave $5 million to races in
yeah.
Oregon, because it's going to go to some super PAC somewhere that's doing legislative races all around the country, and it's paid for by, a better Oregon PAC or some crap that you have
Yep.
no idea what it is.
Yeah, there literally will be no clarity on individuals and who donated to this, right? That's the biggest problem, because it's if you do multiple state stuff, as long as the donor doesn't say, look, I specifically want these dollars going to help Jan Smith in Oregon's second district, then you don't have to declare that the money was passed through for Jan Smith. It just goes into this big pot, and if there's all kinds of donors nationally, it's hard to tell who gave what, right? And whether or not it was meant to be spent in Oregon. Yeah, I think this is terrible. I think this thing stinks to high heaven. The whole thing with FTX stinks to high heaven. There needs to be an investigation into it. I don't think there will be, not at least not while Biden's president. But the fact that it has these tentacles in Oregon, and then the Democrat Party in Oregon behaved the way they did. Democrats in Oregon behaved the way they did, and how they declared. There should be an independent investigation into it. And until there is, none of this is going to change.
Yeah.
And I've been on this side. I've been on both sides of this. Been investigated by the FEC on multiple because of multiple complaints filed. Always exonerated. And I've also been on the side where, I feel like we've been abused. The funny thing is the investigations tend to always go one way. It's always us getting investigated, never the other side. And
their cases get dismissed.
yeah,
Yeah.
they don't even get investigated most of the time, which is silly. But I've done work in Mississippi. I've done work in Utah. Those are two of the reddest states in the entire country. I've seen corruption in both those states. Power corrupts. And when you have a one-party state, the power tends to consolidate, and it tends to corrupt and cover. And I could tell you stories, about Utah. I could tell you stories about Mississippi. And I think there needs to be investigations in both those states when politicians behave badly, because I do believe that we have to have a system that people can believe in, that they can believe is fair, and it's good, that the rules are going to be applied equally amongst both teams. And I don't think we have that in Oregon. I also don't think we necessarily always have it in Utah, and I'm certain we don't have it in Mississippi, based on my experience in Mississippi.
Yeah.
I mean, Mississippi was just unbelievable. Like I literally could not believe it. Like
Huh.
cash in bags in Mississippi, and out cash in bags and out the door.
I wonder if
And
that's where Lamoda got their idea from.
yeah, so I mean, so that's my opinion on it. I'm disappointed with this.
Yeah, I think you're right though. There's a certain sense amongst just the electorate on both sides that, all politicians are corrupt, and everybody's got a grift, everybody's making money,
Yeah,
everybody's getting bags of cash.
yeah,
In some cases it is true, right? It does
yeah,
happen. I would be remiss to say that. I think that there's a certain distrust in that, and because politics, partly because politics has gotten into every portion of our lives, government has gotten into. And
yeah,
so now there's a constituency within every portion of our lives. So whether you're in talking about energy or you're talking about education or you name it, right? There's constituencies, and those constituencies need lobbyists, and those lobbyists need bills to either pass or fail. And so that desire to win, or that desire to make sure that a bill doesn't pass or a bill does pass, you people are good. It's our human nature to want to
yeah,
win, and some people don't think that it's corrupt to give $10,000 to a legislator before asking them to vote on a solar bill, 24 hours before. It's like,
yeah, yeah. Well, look
okay,
at Menendez.
it wasn't
What?
technically illegal, but the
Yeah,
reality is like, are you going to vote no? Like,
yeah,
who didn't, when that solar developer gave all those legislators money, and then that bill came up in the short session. Who didn't get a check? Vicky.
Vicky. Yeah,
Vicky's been she's been pretty adamant against
yeah,
solar on farmland, and I
yeah,
I'm surprised. I mean, why wouldn't they give
yeah,
her one? I think she's
yeah,
so interesting to me. But speaking of money, I want to pivot. One last thing I want to get your topic on, since you're kind of our federal guy,
yeah,
is the congressional races. So I'm just
yeah,
going to run through the money real quick. So Bonamici second quarter numbers came out. She's got 600 grand. That doesn't matter. Cliff Bence's got 1.1 million. That does matter. So he can give that up to other candidates. Maxine Dexter has basically nothing because she spent it all to win.
yeah, yeah,
And Val Hoyle has 851,000 in CD4 against Monique Despain, whose her burn rates basically about where she's spending. So she's got about 192,000. So she's raised 199,000. So she's probably
yeah,
what her burn rate's probably 80%, which that's not very good. I think she's got to do a little
yeah.
better.
Yep.
Uh, Lori's doing well. Chavez Dreamer in CD5. She's got 2.4 million. She raised 577,000, which is good. She only spent 233,000, so she's holding on to a decent chunk of change right now,
Yeah.
2.4 million. Janelle Bynum, 1.3 million with 1,087,000 on hand, and she spent 580,000. So she didn't have to spend a lot of her money to beat Jamie McLeod Skinner. I mean, other people spent a lot of money to beat
Yeah.
her. And then the race that the district you live in, CD6,
Yeah.
Selena's pretty decent, $660,000 rake. She's got 2.169 million, and Mike Erickson raised 152,000 and has 234,000 on hand. So pretty interesting numbers. Obviously, we only care about 4, 5, and 6 in Oregon. Those are the ones that
Yeah.
are on the table for us. And so let's go to the high water mark one, CD5. This is going to be an interesting race from a standpoint of one, the rematch, right? I mean, Janelle Bynum beat Lori
Yeah.
Chavez Dreamer twice in state house races, but Janelle was always the incumbent, or original first time was open seat, but then now Lori is the incumbent,
Yeah.
and incumbency makes a big difference in races, especially
Yeah.
in congressional races. And because the Republicans will spend whatever it takes to retain it.
Yep.
And the Democrats they'll spend a lot, but depending on where the map takes them, they either pull out or they stay in depending on what the race looks like. So I got a candidate in this district that's not in the CD race, but in the state house
Yeah.
side. But so I'm really hoping that Lori does well. I think she's got teams on the ground. They're doing pretty
Yeah.
well. What are you kind of hearing in your circles about this
Yeah.
one?
Well, first off, I think the world of Lori. Just put it out there. Watching her when she first ran for state rep, she worked harder than not anybody I've ever seen, but she definitely worked harder than 90% of candidates that run for office. She is a hard worker. She gets out there, she hits the road. I think this is going to be a very difficult race. I mean, that race is always going to be tough. Every 2 years, she's going to have a fight.
Yeah.
But I think she should win it. I think she'll be able to put the money together, run the campaign. I think she's a very disciplined candidate. She's a good fundraiser, but also she's just a disciplined candidate. She works hard. She'll get out. She'll go meet with people. So I think, look, I think the Republicans in the House are going to have a hard time holding the House this year. I don't think we're going to get coattails out of Trump that we typically get out of a lot of candidates. It's just this weird thing that happens. And I was looking at some races around the country this morning. I think it's tough. But I do think that in her race, I think she'll end up winning. I think it'll be close, but she'll end up winning. I think I look at, District 6, the Erickson race. It's going to be much tougher, and Monique's race is going to be much tougher. I think the good thing is we have three good, solid candidates. I mean, Monique is a really good candidate. And I think Mike Erickson's a good candidate. I think, he's got some work to do. But,
I think Mike got in. Don't you think Mike and I've known Mike about as long as I've known you, really, and he since texted me a few times since I've been fairly critical of his race.
have you? I didn't know that. Yeah,
Yeah. I'm not critical of Mike. I'm critical of the
yeah.
race, right? I'm just
Tough
critical of the
race.
numbers that
Yeah,
area. I think his chance to beat Salinas was before she was an incumbent, because
yeah,
that power of incumbency that she has is pretty, and she's a hard worker too. I mean, to
yeah,
that point, the numbers there just don't pull the way
yeah,
you think they should pull, and I just don't know where that movable middle is. There's just not a lot of that movable middle now. If something, and I agree with you that the Trump Biden stuff, sometimes what happens is those people, they go, well, I'm gonna vote for Trump and now I'm gonna vote Democrat
yeah.
for
Split
Congress
ticket.
because they want that division of power, right?
Splitters.
So, and especially for us here, because we don't have Senate race or anything like that. I think with you, I think we might. I'd hate to say we lose Congress. I hope maybe we eke it out. It'll be close either way, whether
Yeah,
we lose or win. I think it's going to be close.
I do
I think
too.
we do take back the Senate. I really like where our Senate races are. I love
Yeah,
Nevada, Arizona, Montana. I just love where Wisconsin. I think we got a shot. I think
yeah,
I think we got good Senate candidates. So,
yeah,
Lori, so I like with Mike's. I hope Mike does well. I really
yeah,
do. I think that he's wanted this job forever. The problem Mike's going to have is that the NRCC is just not going to come in and back him. I just think that's his
yeah,
biggest. He's just going to have to decide if he wants to throw his money into it, and I
yeah.
think that him and Chuck Adams, who's running his race, they're smart people. They know what they're doing, and
Yep.
I just think
Chuck's very capable.
they're going
Yeah,
to keep looking at the numbers. And if Mike's smart, I would just sit on my money and just wait and just watch those generic ballot numbers. Let the generic ballot numbers play itself out.
yeah,
And then if there's an opportunity, you strike hard and fast in October. And then you give Salinas no chance to back up. I mean,
yeah,
I'm hoping he's testing stuff like the men and girls sports and things like
yeah,
those kind of social type of issues where
yeah,
I think he can move some people and move some of those suburban moms away from Salinas. So, which could be interesting for that race. So that's
Yeah.
and Lori, I agree with you. I think she works her tail off. I've seen her. She's at
Yeah.
every freaking parade I've ever, all of a sudden you see her there and I'm like, wow, she's raised money. I mean, over $1 million in a quarter is awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
that's you can't ask for that. And that's $3,300 a pop. Like you just said, like
Yep.
that's not easy for your
Mm-mm.
personal pack to raising on 3,300, the backs of $3,300
Yep.
contributions. And I think she's going to outwork Janelle. I don't think, Bynum's going to work as hard. I don't think she's going to do the groundwork that Lori will do. And I think you're right with Happy Valley where she ran those state rep seats.
Yeah.
That's such a swingy area of
Yeah.
the world. It's so hard to win those ones. So I'm going to say Lori ends up eking that one out again. It's going to be a 6 to 15,000 vote difference every cycle because that's just the way that thing. But that's going to be a turnout issue in that seat. I think it's whoever turns out more. Lynn County's got to turn out for Lori in a big way. Like she's got to get the
Yeah.
R's to turn out. The one that's very interesting to me, and this will be the last one we cover, is just that Val Hoyle, Monique Despain. It's kind of the coast, and then it bleeds into
Yeah.
Eugene and
Should
Corvallis.
be.
If she didn't have Eugene and Corvallis, I'd say Monique Despain wins going away. But there's some hardcore down, that are Democrat down ballot all the way in that Eugene Corvallis area. That's going to make this race pretty tough for me to see it as a winner. But Val Hoyle's got that LaMotta stuff, the things
Yeah.
that just keep dragging her, and that corruption so this one is really, I think, how they play the negatives on Val Hoyle. In my mind, how they play the negatives in Val Hoyle, and because Monique, like you said, she's got the resume,
Yeah.
and she stayed out of the fray. But I think that how you play the negatives, you got to take some votes away from Val Hoyle, or you got to make sure that they don't vote.
I mean, there's this cycle can be weird. I think, one of the questions, I had this conversation with a good friend the other day, and we were just talking, and I think, how is this presidential race going to impact all the down ballot races? And I'm not, I don't really know if there's coattails for people. There will be for a handful of people, but I don't really think overall there is. I think how it's going to impact it is going to be in turnout, right? So will the Democrats, turnout and money, will the Democrats be so frustrated with the top of the ticket that they just don't show up and vote? And I think there will be some people that are that way. And I think they're not necessarily going to be Democrats. I think Democrats are going to be fully motivated to show up. I think it's going to be these people that can't vote for Trump because they just can't, but don't really feel comfortable voting for the Democrat candidate either. They're just throwing their hands up and saying, I just can't do any of this. And I think that could hurt the vote for Democrats. I don't know if it'll hurt it in Oregon, right? Because we may be different, but it's certainly going to hurt it in some places, like some races in Arizona, possibly in Southern California, in some of these swing districts in Orange County, in different places. But I was really thinking about this with 4, 5, and 6, right? And then the other piece of this is, as donors realize that the top of the ticket cannot win, will they retask their dollars to ensure a House victory for Democrats? And if that's the case, I think it will be. It will make it'll make every one of these races more difficult for us because they will pour money into them.
Yeah,
because they will say, we can't win the presidency. We've got to have a backstop, and the Republicans are going to take the Senate. So all these races are going to be House races that we care about. And you're already kind of, I think, seeing some of that going on. But I think that's what's that likely. I think that's what's going to happen. It's one of the reasons I am a little concerned if you don't have your fundraising up yet, and you don't have enough money to compete. It's likely you're not going to get there if you're a Republican, but they're going to get there if you're a Democrat. Because I can tell you the other piece of this is the Republicans. The presidential race is going to rob a lot of these congressional races of money. It just is.
Yeah, we're already seeing it. Yeah, I think we're seeing it already.
Yeah. Yeah, but but there is a group of donors that do care deeply about, like there is a focus amongst some that we got to focus on the House races. I've got a couple clients and this is all they care about is the House races and the Senate races. They don't care about the presidential. And so I'm doing some projects in a couple states that, that's where the focus is. Like a great example of this is Schweikert's race down in Maricopa County in Arizona. And, I've done a lot of work down there, but, Schweikert's in the seat that, he's going to have a tough time winning that seat, but they want Schweikert to win it. And Schweikert is one of the few fiscal hawks left in the House. Like he's old school fiscal hawk.
Yeah.
He's the guy we need there. And he is a numbers guy. And so, I can guarantee there's going to be a ton of money jumped into that race to try to save that seat. And it's one that we, could easily lose this cycle,
Yeah.
I mean, funny thing is first race I helped him with, I think was 10 or 12. We did a bunch of IE work in that race. And he is every time since every 2 years since then, it's been a fight to keep that seat. And this is exactly what's going to happen to Lori every single 2 years. It's going to be a fight to keep her seat.
It makes you wonder how long you want to do that if you're up for a battle every 2 years. Like, is flying back and forth to DC 30 times a year really worth it? Makes you wonder. I think if she wins this time, though, the hill becomes a lot harder to climb, right? So once you're an incumbent and you've kind of established that incumbency, it just becomes more expensive for them to take you out. And the same is true on both sides of the aisle in that one. There really is a power there.
Yeah. Lori's personality too, though, I will say this. Her personality is very different than David Schweikert's. I mean, she's very likable. People like her. I think she does a great job in social groups when she's speaking. David is a numbers guy, and he just kind of comes off like a numbers guy,
Well, she's got a house in Arizona, so maybe if this doesn't work, she can go down to Swipe.
She may actually live in this district. She may actually have a house in this district, right?
Yeah, I was just down in Phoenix. Vicky and I are in the. I do a little bit of work down there, and then we were just down there for her birthday, and we were looking at second homes ourselves, down in Arizona, because son's going to GCU and all the things.
Yeah.
And my youngest is going to go there, and
that's great.
It's just a different feeling when you're in Arizona. Like it's just different than Oregon, and so there's just that it's just a little, like, all the language out there is a little harder, right, than the language here, and it's just slightly. And then they got the Trump stuff, right, because it's a Trump swing state, so it's you got Trump everywhere, and it's just very interesting when you're down there versus Oregon, and we'll see. Well, Russ, I'm gonna end it here so we don't take up too much of your time, and this was went a little bit longer, but we touched on a lot of topics, which is pretty awesome. And I really thank you coming on. It was a blast. Follow Russ at R Walker FW.
Yeah, on Twitter.
Yeah, on Twitter. Yeah, we still call it Twitter. He's got more followers than me, so you don't really have to follow him too much. You can follow me instead. At Brian G. Iverson. But anyways, we have fun on Twitter together. We go back and forth. He posts a lot of more national stuff, like you can see, where I tend to stick more statewide, but you can see a lot of things he's working on there, and follow him. And thanks again for your time. Appreciate it.
Love it. Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me, man.